What's the over-under on Herculez US men's national team in this segment? I'm taking 27. Let's see how that goes. And you're not even talking about the US, it's about Brazil as well. Boys, take it away. Of course, Brazil disappointing yesterday.
Absolutely. Yeah, very disappointing in that scoreless draw against Costa Rica, of course, took place just down the road from here at SoFi Stadium. And it was really a pretty shocking performance from Brazil. Lots of the ball, lots of shots, 19, but just 3 shots on target. And, of course, one of the big storylines in this one is Vinicius Junior, who was subbed off in the 70th minute. Here's what the Real Madrid superstar had to say after the match, quote, "We know we can improve. We have to improve. I also know what I can improve, evolve, and do for our team. New coach, new players, everything takes time. Our fans want everything immediately done. But we're going little by little. In the next game, I'm sure we'll play much better because we now really understand what the competition will be like, what the pitch, what the referees will be like," end quote. As I mentioned, Ale, he came off with 20 minutes to play last night. Did you think that was the right decision?
If we're basing it on his performance up until that point, yeah. However, it's a big decision to make if you're Dorival Jr., the new manager for Brazil, when you're trying to establish some sort of rhythm for this team. Now, Vini Jr. is saying we're going little by little. It's very little by very little. And in your opening statement, you mentioned that that was a shocking performance by Brazil. Historically, yes, shocking. But by the standards that this version of Brazil has been setting, it's not all that surprising. It's becoming a typical performance for Brazil. A team that is struggling to create opportunities, that's struggling to maintain possession and do anything with that possession in the attacking half, that is struggling, once they do create those opportunities, to put those chances away, to get any sort of dynamic movement coming out of the midfield. They depend heavily on the individual talent and the individual play. So it's Rafinha 1v1 situation. It's Vini Jr. 1v1 situation. It's Rodrigo 1v1 situation. Whoever comes on, whether that's Savinho, who actually made a difference, but he made a difference by doing what? 1v1 situation. There isn't combination play going from Brazil. There isn't getting in behind. There is a lot of kind of staring at each other, hoping that somebody's about to do something, and they haven't been able to do that. And it's not just a Costa Rica game. This is the same story that we have seen from Brazil in Conmebol qualifiers.
How much of this, Herc, you think is a Vinicius Junior problem versus a bigger picture Brazil problem?
Bigger picture of Brazil. Listen, Vini Jr. has a lot of blame here. Certainly, his actions, his play. Over 30 games, only 3 goals. His last goal for Brazil was over a year ago. At some point, he himself, who's a Ballon d'Or candidate, has to do something on the field. It's not been the case, but this is a bigger picture for Brazil. You look at the names on this roster, a far cry from the Brazils that Ali, you and I grew up watching. You look at the outside backs on this roster, I mean, Danilo, Wendell, Arana, you know, it's a far cry from Marcelo, Roberto Carlos, Cafu, Dani Alves. There's not that much quality on this Brazilian side throughout all the lines, especially when it comes to being effective in front of goal. Marquinhos, Paqueta, more goals than the forwards that they have, whether it's Rafinha, whether it's Rodrigo, whether it's Endrick or Vini Jr. It's a reality. They lack that quality. Even when it comes to the coaching, Dorival Jr. Certainly may be good in Brazil, but does he have the resume to coach the Brazilian national team? Over 26 teams in his time. 5 in the last 4 years, more of a journeyman type of resume. This isn't the Brazil that we grew up watching, and maybe they're a victim of that, of how good those Brazilian teams were. But it's a far cry from those teams. They lost the first 3 of 6 World Cup qualifiers. Historic loss to Argentina at home. This is much bigger than just, you know, the individual performance of Vini Jr.
However, this is Vini Jr.'s team. And the camera kept panning to Neymar yesterday watching the game. Well, it's no longer Neymar's team. It's Vini's team. And so if it is Vini's team, then he has to take on that responsibility. So what I would say to Vini is, there's no time like the present. Don't tell me that, oh, now we know what this competition is going to be like. Now we know what the field is going to be like and what the referee is going to do and what the expectations are. No, you should have known that coming into the match against Costa Rica, and you should have taken it upon yourself to actually have an impact on the game, which he did not. And that I think it's on him. So, yes, Brazil as a whole is down, but this was a down performance from Vini Jr. as well.
Can they turn it around?
It's very difficult. I mean, they can, because some of the teams they'll play, will lend himself for them to have a rebound game. But certainly, when we think about Brazil, can they turn around? You're talking about can they make the final, can they win the final? I don't think this Brazilian team has enough talent to do that.
Okay, so Brazil playing to a scoreless draw against Costa Rica. Elsewhere in Group D, Colombia beat Paraguay by a score of 2-1. This was an interesting game. Colombia at moments both looked strong and then vulnerable. What was your takeaway?
It was that. Very good, Seth. They look strong sometimes and then, yes, vulnerable in transition and vulnerable against a team in Paraguay that doesn't create a whole lot. What does the injury to John Lucumí gonna do for Colombia in that back line? Because that, as we mentioned last night, it becomes the Yerry Mina show, and the Yerry Mina show can be scary, can be really scary. It is a drama waiting to happen. It is a horror show waiting to happen. There are moments in which he can be good, and other times where you go, oh, if you're Colombia, you're hanging on and saying, what's going to happen in that back line? And why do I say that? It's because Colombia has actually been very good defensively, and that's where they set their success from. Now, when we think Colombia, we think James Rodriguez. And James Rodriguez is a guy that when he touches the ball with time and space in the final third, he can still make a difference for this team. But there's a problem here. He gives you that offensively, but he gives you little defensively. And so there's going to be guys running in and around James Rodriguez that are going to have to do a whole lot of work. So I'm thinking about Richard Rios. I'm thinking about Jefferson Lerma, who came off injured. What is his status? And I'm thinking about players that are going to have to cover a whole lot of ground in order to accommodate James Rodriguez being on the field. Lastly, what I'll say for Colombia is, if they're going to achieve the things that we think they're capable of achieving in this tournament, Luis Diaz has to be far more effective. I'm not saying he has to work harder. I'm not saying he has to run more, because the activity is there. The running is there. But he seems to be running in the wrong places. And he seems to be spending energy in the wrong places. He should be spending that energy in the attacking half. He should be spending that energy in more central positions. Instead, he's trying to take three players on the left-hand side, getting out of that pressure and trying to find a cross. That's not sustainable. He wasn't really impactful in yesterday's game. He has to be better in order for Colombia to do the things that I think and they think they can achieve.
It's a team the U.S. could see in the knockout rounds. What'd you make of Colombia?
Typical Colombia that we've been watching in World Cup qualifying. It's a team that doesn't score a lot of goals. They only have 6 in World Cup qualifying, but they don't concede, as Ali says. They're very good defensively. The problem is here versus a Paraguay team that is abysmal going forward. They've got 2 players playing in Europe, Miguel Almirón being one of them. They're very, very blunt in front of goal. Didn't offer a whole lot. For 20 minutes, made this very, very interesting. I mean, Paraguay has scored 1 goal in World Cup qualifying, not exactly a world beater, but they defend very well. So what we knew about Paraguay, they were. What we know about Colombia, they are. I think this go-around, let's say if you're the U.S. men's national team, you are a little bit better taking care of the ball. There are moments where Colombia lend themselves to being transitioned in. And certainly, Ali brought up Yerry Mina. That's a massive factor. Yerry Mina isn't the player he once was, physically or talent-wise. If that player's on the field, certainly with the transition pace that the U.S. men's national team have, you can have opportunities, but this is a very good team. They find ways to grind out victories.
So Colombia wins against Paraguay, which means after the first round of games in Group D, it's Colombia that sits atop the group. Of course, Brazil and Costa Rica sandwiched there in the middle. Paraguay bringing up the rear. Next games on Friday, Brazil against Paraguay and Colombia taking on Costa Rica. That's Group D.